What if the outcome of World War II didn't just hinge on soldiers or firepower but on fake armies, dead bodies with forged documents, and secret Nazi scientists working for America? Beneath the headlines and battle maps, a hidden war was being fought, one of spies, sabotage, and deception so bold it's hard to believe it was real. These are the 5 secret missions that didn't just win battles. They rewrote the course of history. During World War II, the fate of millions rested on a secret battle waged not with guns or tanks, but with brains, perseverance, and intricate machines. This was the fight to break the Nazis' encrypted communications, locked behind a device known as the Enigma machine. Operation Enigma was a story of intelligence, innovation, and collaboration that changed the course of the war and, ultimately, history itself. The Enigma machine was a complex cipher device used by Nazi Germany to send coded messages that were virtually impossible to decipher. Its design was mechanical and electrical, with rotating wheels that scrambled messages into seemingly random sequences of letters. Every day, the settings changed, producing billions of possible combinations. The Germans believed their communications were secure, confident that even if their messages were intercepted, no one would be able to understand them. The Allied powers, especially Britain, quickly realized the devastating potential of breaking this code. If they could intercept and decrypt German military orders, they would gain a strategic advantage beyond anything previously imagined. The mission to crack Enigma became a top-secret effort led by a diverse group of mathematicians, linguists, and engineers working at a covert facility called Bletchley Park. At the heart of this operation was Alan Turing, a brilliant mathematician whose ideas would lay the foundation for modern computing. Turing understood that the key to breaking Enigma was to automate the process of testing the countless possible settings of the machine. He designed an electromechanical device called the bomb, which could simulate Enigma machines and rapidly test settings against intercepted messages. Turing's approach was not just about technology. It was about understanding patterns and using logic to reduce the enormous complexity of the code. The team also relied on cribs, educated guesses about words or phrases likely to appear in messages. By combining these insights with the bomb's speed, they began to unlock crucial German communications. The work at Bletchley Park was intense and secretive. Operators worked around the clock, fueled by urgency and the knowledge that every message decrypted could save lives. The effort was so secret that even the Allied military leadership was kept in the dark about its full scope. The intelligence gained from Enigma decryption was known by the code name Ultra, and it was shared only on a strict need-to-know basis. One of the earliest and most significant successes of Ultra was in the Battle of the Atlantic. German U-boats were wreaking havoc on Allied supply ships, threatening Britain's survival. Thanks to decrypted Enigma messages, the Allies could reroute convoys around wolf packs, dramatically reducing losses. This advantage was pivotal, as it allowed Britain to continue receiving food, troops, and war materials. The benefits of breaking Enigma extended far beyond naval warfare. It influenced the planning of the North African campaign, helped disrupt German supply lines, and provided insights into Hitler's strategic intentions. Ultra-intelligence was used sparingly and carefully to avoid revealing that Enigma had been broken. When an attack was foiled because of decrypted messages, the Allies often had to create alternate explanations to maintain the secrecy of their source. The human cost of Operation Enigma was immense. Those working at Bletchley Park endured long hours, pressure, and isolation. Many of their contributions went unrecognized for decades after the war because the mission remained classified. Yet their work shortened the war by an estimated 2 to 4 years, saving millions of lives. The success of Enigma decryption was not only a triumph of technology and intellect, but also a story of collaboration between different nations and disciplines. Polish mathematicians had laid the groundwork by first breaking early versions of Enigma before the war. Their knowledge was shared with the British, accelerating the efforts at Bletchley Park. Operation Enigma revealed the importance of intelligence and code-breaking as a new kind of warfare, one fought in shadows and silence but with consequences that shaped entire battles and nations. The legacy of this mission stretches into the modern era, influencing cybersecurity, cryptography, and the very concept of information warfare. The story of Operation Enigma is a testament to human ingenuity under pressure, the value of perseverance, and the power of secrets held behind closed doors. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories are won not on battlefields, but in rooms filled with machines and minds working tirelessly against the clock. In the shadows of World War II, a group of unsung heroes waged war not with bullets or bombs, but with art, sound, and illusion. They were the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. Their mission was simple in concept but extraordinary in execution: to deceive, distract, and manipulate the enemy. By using inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, sound effects, and a flair for theater, they saved thousands of lives and played a critical role in the success of Allied campaigns across Europe. The Ghost Army was made up of about 1,100 men, mostly artists, designers, sound engineers, actors, and other creative minds pulled from New York ad agencies, Hollywood studios, and art schools like Cooper Union and the Art Institute of Chicago. These weren't traditional soldiers, they were innovators, thinkers, illusionists. And they were about to become the most unconventional warriors in history. Their story began in 1944, after the Allied landings at Normandy. As troops pushed deeper into Nazi-occupied France, the need for strategic deception grew. The Germans were sharp and brutal tacticians, and every step forward came at a high cost. The Ghost Army's job was to confuse and mislead them about where and when Allied forces would strike next. One of their most audacious techniques involved inflatable rubber tanks, planes, and artillery. These life-sized decoys were realistic enough to fool aerial reconnaissance, especially when viewed from a distance. Set up quickly in open fields and supported by hastily built tents and fake infrastructure, these decoy camps gave the impression of large military units where none existed. But the illusion didn't stop at visuals. Sound engineers created massive speakers mounted on trucks that blasted pre-recorded battlefield noises. These soundtracks included the rumble of tanks moving, the clatter of soldiers setting up camp, and even the casual chatter of troops, all designed to be heard up to 15 miles away. The recordings were layered and looped to match the terrain and context, giving the enemy the impression that thousands of soldiers were nearby, preparing for battle. Meanwhile, radio operators used a technique called spoof radio, mimicking the communication styles and rhythms of real Allied units. They transmitted false orders and troop movements, which were often intercepted by the Germans and believed to be genuine. Each radio transmission was carefully crafted to match the personality and quirks of actual commanders, adding another layer of credibility. The men also engaged in what they called special effects, which included acting. Some dressed in different uniforms and drove jeeps through French towns pretending to be generals, leaving a false trail of military presence. Others would go to local cafes, casually talk about fake operations, and, accidentally, let slip secrets that were meant to be overheard by enemy spies or collaborators. Over the course of the war, the Ghost Army conducted more than 20 deception operations. One of the most critical was Operation Viersen in March 1945. As the Allies prepared to cross the Rhine River into Germany, a major step toward ending the war, the Ghost Army created a fake division north of the actual crossing point. They inflated over 200 dummy tanks, blared pre-recorded troop movements, and transmitted false radio chatter. The deception worked. German forces repositioned to face the Phantom Army, thinning their defenses at the real crossing site. When General Patton's troops struck where the Germans least expected, they met with far less resistance than they would have otherwise. This single operation likely saved thousands of Allied lives. What made the Ghost Army unique was its blend of creativity and courage. Their work required them to operate near the front lines, often behind enemy lines, with no weapons other than their wits and illusions. If captured, they would have been executed not as prisoners of war but as spies. The danger was real, and the stakes were high. Despite their enormous contribution, the story of the Ghost Army remained classified for over 40 years. The soldiers were sworn to secrecy, and for decades, their efforts were unknown even to their families. It wasn't until the 1990s that documents were declassified and the full scope of their work was revealed. The legacy of the Ghost Army is not just about the cleverness of their tactics. It's a lesson in how imagination, when combined with strategy, can become a powerful weapon. They demonstrated that war is not only a matter of force and firepower but also of perception and psychology. Their success saved lives, accelerated Allied victories, and brought us closer to the end of the most devastating war in history. To this day, many of the men who served in the Ghost Army remain unrecognized officially by the U.S. government, though efforts have been made to honor them with medals and awards. Their legacy lives on in military deception tactics used in later conflicts, and their story stands as a powerful reminder of what can be achieved when creativity meets courage in the face of chaos. In the icy wilderness of Norway during World War II, a group of young resistance fighters embarked on one of the most daring sabotage missions in history, a mission that may have prevented the Nazis from building an atomic bomb. Known as Operation Gunnerside, this secret operation targeted a heavily fortified facility producing a rare and crucial substance, heavy water. Without it, the Nazi nuclear program could not proceed. Success meant delaying or destroying Hitler's dream of nuclear dominance. Failure could have changed the fate of the world. The story begins in 1934, when Norsk Hydro, a company in Vemork, Norway, began producing heavy water, a form of water containing an isotope of hydrogen called deuterium. This substance was not widely used at the time, but by the late 1930s, scientists understood its potential role in sustaining nuclear chain reactions. When Germany invaded Norway in 1940, they seized the Vemork plant and ramped up heavy water production under tight security. Allied intelligence soon realized the implications. Germany's top scientists, including Werner Heisenberg, were believed to be working toward the development of a nuclear weapon. If they succeeded, and if they had access to heavy water, it could give Hitler the power to dominate the world. Britain and Norway, working together, knew they had to stop it. An initial sabotage attempt in 1942, known as Operation Freshman, failed tragically when two gliders carrying British engineers crashed due to bad weather, and the survivors were captured and executed. But the mission was too important to abandon. In February 1943, the Allies launched Operation Gunnerside, a more covert and surgical approach. This time, they would use a team of Norwegians, trained in Britain, familiar with the terrain, and motivated by patriotism. Led by Joachim Ronneberg, the team of 6 young commandos parachuted into the Norwegian wilderness and skied for days through snow-covered mountains, facing brutal winds and sub-zero temperatures to link up with a smaller local resistance group. The target was the basement of the Vemork facility, where the heavy water electrolytic cells were housed. The plant was heavily guarded, surrounded by steep cliffs, with only a narrow bridge providing direct access. A frontal assault would be suicide. The saboteurs chose a more daring path, scaling a 500-foot ravine, crossing a frozen river, and climbing a cliff to reach the plant from below. It was a move so bold and unexpected that it evaded German patrols entirely. Under cover of darkness on February 27, 1943, the team infiltrated the facility. Inside the basement, they placed explosives on key equipment and pipelines, carefully avoiding guards stationed above. Their mission was not just to destroy the heavy water production line, but to do it cleanly, with no civilian casualties. As the charges detonated, they crippled the facility's ability to produce heavy water. The saboteurs vanished into the snowy wilderness, splitting up to avoid capture. Miraculously, all members of the Gunnerside team survived. Ronneberg and others skied over 200 miles across frozen terrain to reach neutral Sweden, escaping into legend. The explosion destroyed nearly 500 kilograms of heavy water and halted production for months. The Germans attempted to rebuild, but persistent Allied bombings and local sabotage delayed them further. Eventually, under increasing pressure, the Nazis decided to transport the remaining heavy water to Germany. This led to a dramatic sequel. Norwegian resistance fighters sabotaged the SF Hydro, the ferry transporting barrels of heavy water across Lake Tinn. They planted explosives in the hull, and the ferry sank in deep waters, taking the cargo with it. Though several civilians aboard tragically died, the mission ensured that the remaining heavy water never reached German scientists. Operation Gunnerside was hailed by the British Special Operations Executive as the most successful act of sabotage of the entire war. It not only disrupted the Nazi nuclear program but also demoralized German command, who realized they were being outwitted even in occupied territory. The mission's impact extended far beyond its physical destruction. After the war, captured German scientists admitted that the loss of heavy water significantly delayed their nuclear ambitions. By the time the Allies dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Germany had made no comparable progress. Some historians argue that if Gunnerside had failed, the outcome of the war, and the shape of the modern world, might have been very different. The bravery of the Norwegian saboteurs became a symbol of national pride and international admiration. They were ordinary men, farmers, engineers, students, who risked everything to protect the future. Their courage, precision, and dedication serve as a timeless example of how a few determined individuals can stand against overwhelming odds. Operation Gunnerside remains a cornerstone of World War II covert operations, not only for its impact on Nazi Germany's nuclear ambitions, but for its unmatched combination of tactical skill, stealth, and human courage. The world may never know how close Hitler came to the atomic bomb, but thanks to the icy footsteps of 6 men in the Norwegian wilderness, we never had to find out. In the shadowy world of World War II espionage, Britain ran one of the most audacious and cunning intelligence operations in history, a deception campaign so successful that it shaped the outcome of D-Day and misled the German High Command for years. It was called the double-cross system, and at its heart was a brilliant tactic: capture enemy spies, turn them into double agents, and use them to feed false information straight back to the Nazis. This web of lies, managed with surgical precision, would become one of the greatest intelligence coups of the war. The story begins in 1940, when Britain faced the very real threat of a German invasion. Knowing that German spies were likely operating inside the country, MI5, Britain's domestic intelligence agency, began an intensive hunt to find and stop them. What they discovered was chilling. Nazi Germany had indeed inserted spies into British territory. Some were parachuted in, others arrived by sea. They came with radios, invisible ink, and detailed instructions. Most of them were amateurs, ill-prepared and often confused, and MI5 quickly captured nearly all of them. But instead of executing these agents or locking them away for life, MI5 saw an opportunity. What if, instead of silencing the spies, they could use them? Thus was born the double-cross system, codenamed the XX system, a play on words representing double agents and the Roman numeral for 20. Under the supervision of intelligence officer Thomas Argyle Robertson, known simply as TAR, the system began converting captured spies into British agents. Some were coerced. Others turned willingly, seeing no future in loyalty to the Third Reich. And a few had never been fully committed to Germany's cause in the first place. Each double agent was carefully managed, with their communications monitored and edited by MI5 handlers. Messages were crafted to appear authentic, but were laced with strategic disinformation. The goal was not just to confuse, but to build trust. British intelligence wanted German handlers to believe that their agents were successful, to such a degree that their reports would be relied upon for major strategic decisions. Over time, this network grew into a stable of legendary double agents. One of the most famous was Juan Pujol Garcia, a Spaniard who despised fascism. Initially rejected by the British, Pujol went rogue, pretending to be a German spy while feeding them false information of his own invention. Eventually, MI5 brought him into the official fold under the code name Garbo. His fabricated spy network, entirely imaginary, grew to 27 fake subagents, all of whom were invented out of thin air. The Germans never suspected the truth and believed Pujol was one of their most valuable informants. Another key figure was Duško Popov, codenamed Tricycle, a Serbian playboy with connections to both the Nazis and the British. He operated in high society and was rumored to be part of Ian Fleming's inspiration for James Bond. Popov passed along carefully curated intelligence, further cementing the deception. The double-cross system reached its peak during Operation Fortitude, the elaborate disinformation campaign leading up to D-Day. The Allies needed Hitler to believe that the invasion of Europe would take place not in Normandy, the real landing zone, but at Pas-de-Calais, a more obvious and fortified location. Through the double-cross agents, Britain sent dozens of false messages suggesting that an enormous army, the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, led by General Patton, was stationed in southeastern England, preparing to strike Calais. To support the lie, they built dummy tanks, fake landing craft, and entire radio networks that simulated troop movements. But it was the agents, particularly Garbo, who sealed the illusion. Garbo's reports were so convincing that even after the Allies stormed Normandy on June 6, 1944, Hitler continued to hold back key reinforcements in Calais for 7 weeks, believing the main invasion was still to come. This delay allowed the Allies to gain a crucial foothold in France, eventually liberating Paris and pushing into Germany. Without the double-cross system and its carefully orchestrated lies, D-Day might have ended in disaster. What made the operation so effective was the delicate balance it maintained. The false reports had to include just enough truth to remain believable. The agents had to occasionally admit minor Allied victories or setbacks to maintain credibility. MI5 even allowed one German bombing raid to hit a legitimate military target, after being tipped off by a double agent, to keep the ruse intact. It was ruthless, but calculated. After the war, German military archives revealed just how deeply the deception had worked. The Abwehr, Nazi Germany's intelligence service, had been thoroughly manipulated. Many of the agents they believed were serving the Reich had, in fact, been working against it the entire time. Hitler and his commanders had made major strategic decisions based on lies crafted in small, smoke-filled rooms in London. Despite its success, the double-cross system remained classified for decades. Its agents, many of whom risked their lives in psychological and moral battles as much as physical ones, received little recognition. Some took their secrets to the grave. Others lived quiet lives, knowing they had played pivotal roles in defeating one of the greatest threats humanity had ever faced. The double-cross system wasn't just a clever trick, it was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It changed the way nations think about intelligence, deception, and trust. In an age dominated by technology and brute force, it proved that perception could be as powerful as firepower. As World War II came to a close, the world breathed a sigh of relief. Nazi Germany had been defeated, its leadership dismantled, and the horror of its atrocities laid bare. But behind the front lines, in the shadows of science and strategy, a new kind of war was already taking shape, a race not for territory, but for minds. The Allies, especially the United States, faced a grim reality. If they didn't seize the intellectual assets of the Nazi regime, their enemies, particularly the Soviet Union, would. This urgent scramble birthed one of the most controversial missions in history, Operation Paperclip. The mission's goal was clear: recruit the top German scientists, engineers, and technical experts, particularly those with expertise in rocketry, chemical weapons, aviation, and nuclear physics. But there was one significant problem. Many of these scientists had ties to the Nazi Party, and some had played roles in the regime's war machine or even its crimes. The U.S. government had to make a choice: uphold justice or gain an advantage in the dawning Cold War. The decision was swift and pragmatic. The American military and intelligence agencies, especially the newly formed Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, began identifying valuable German scientists before the war even ended. As Allied troops moved through Germany, special teams known as T-Forces swept into research facilities, confiscating documents, blueprints, prototypes, and locating key personnel. The scientists were often given a stark choice: work for the Americans, or risk being taken by the Soviets, or prosecuted. Among the most prominent of these recruits was Wernher von Braun, a brilliant engineer and the father of Germany's V-2 rocket program. The V-2 was the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, used to terrorize London and Antwerp in the final years of the war. Von Braun had been a member of the SS and worked closely with Nazi leadership, including Heinrich Himmler. The production of the V-2 at Mittelwerk used slave labor from the nearby Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, where thousands died under horrific conditions. Despite this, the U.S. saw von Braun and his team as critical assets. With the Cold War heating up, the Soviet Union advancing in rocketry, and fears of another arms race growing, America moved quickly. Von Braun and more than 1,600 other German scientists and their families were quietly transported to the United States between 1945 and 1959 under Operation Paperclip. Officially, The program prohibited hiring anyone who had been more than a nominal Nazi party member or involved in war crimes. But these restrictions were often ignored or circumvented. Documents were altered, backgrounds were sanitized, and security reports were buried. The ends, in the minds of American military planners, justified the means. Once in the U.S., these scientists were put to work in military labs, aerospace centers, and think tanks. Von Braun and his team joined the U.S. Army's rocket development program, eventually forming the core of what would become NASA. His work directly contributed to the development of the Redstone and Jupiter rockets, and ultimately the Saturn V, the rocket that launched Apollo 11 to the moon in 1969. It was a stunning irony. The man whose weapons once rained death on civilians in Europe became a central figure in humanity's greatest leap into space. Other Paperclip scientists worked on high-speed aircraft, jet engines, nerve gas development, and submarine technologies. Many of their innovations shaped the Cold War arms race and the eventual technological superiority of the United States. But the moral cost of Operation Paperclip lingered. Survivors of Nazi camps and their descendants were appalled that known collaborators had not only escaped justice but had been rewarded with comfortable lives and prestigious careers. Some American officials protested, but they were overruled. The fear of Soviet dominance was simply too great. In the Soviet Union, a parallel effort was underway. Soviet agents captured and conscripted hundreds of German scientists for their own rocket and nuclear programs. This mirrored arms race, powered by the brains of the defeated enemy, defined the early decades of the Cold War. Operation Paperclip remained secret for many years. When the truth began to emerge in the 1970s and 80s, the public reaction was mixed. Some saw it as a necessary evil, the brutal logic of geopolitics. Others saw it as a betrayal of justice and human decency, a dark compromise that tainted the very ideals America claimed to uphold. In the decades since, historians and ethicists have debated its legacy. Could the U.S. have succeeded without those scientists? Was justice sacrificed for supremacy? And perhaps most unsettling, how much of modern science was built on knowledge born in tyranny? Operation Paperclip is a story not only of war and technology, but of ethical ambiguity, a reminder that in the pursuit of victory, the lines between right and wrong can blur. It challenges us to ask difficult questions about what we are willing to overlook in the name of progress, and whether the future should ever be built on the foundations of the past's darkest chapters. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?